This is our second panel, and it's on designing your manufacturing with automation in mind. Really grateful to have a fantastic panel here. I will let everybody introduce themselves, because they'll do a better job than I will. I'll keep it short here. I just want to introduce the moderator, my friend Matt Boyd from Boyd Technologies. I have known Matt for close to 40 years, and I'm only 42 years old, so you can do some quick math there. So Matt, thanks for leading this panel.
Thanks, Ben. Ben's dad taught me Little League as a pitcher, which didn't work out. No fault of his own. So let's just do a quick round of introductions, and then we'll get right into it. I'm Matt Boyd. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Boyd Technologies. I'm also a producer of the documentary film Project Frontline, which is about the manufacturing emergency response to coronavirus here in Massachusetts. And I'm a co-host with Brian Johnson for our video series, Boyd Biomedical Design Stories, which is about manufacturing and innovation. I'm actually going to just blow down the list here and do introductions and then go right into questions so that we can get into the meat of this, because I think there's, as we saw in the last panel, there's a lot to talk about here. So I want to make sure we do that. And to my left, we have Quentin Farr, who's the Senior VP of Manufacturing Operations at Volano Vascular. During his time with Volano, he led the development of the Pivo needleless blood draw technology, which resulted ultimately in the sale of the business to Becton Dickinson. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Next to him, we have Frank Pagano. Frank's the founder and CEO of Practical Robotics Services. PRS serves manufacturers with robot sales, custom automation systems, and consulting, and Frank's been involved in mechanical and applications engineering with robotics for decades.
Yes, Scott, thank you for being here. It's our pleasure, or my pleasure, to be here today. And we look forward to a very lively discussion.
And last but not least, our sponsor for the event, Scott Marsick, is the Group Product Manager for Epson Robots, and he has decades of experience in channel development, software partnerships, robotic automation, high-precision differential GPS, satellite and commercial imagery, and process diagnostics, which he will tell you what all of those things mean after. Thanks for being here, all you guys. So, as Ben said, the title of this panel is Designing Your, is this okay, the sound? Okay. The title of the panel is Designing Your Manufacturing with Automation in Mind. And so the goal of this is really to explore automation in life sciences manufacturing, which is a really pretty meaty, complex topic. We're going to navigate through that in three sections. So we'll go first through where are we now in automation and life sciences. Second, how do you identify opportunities and avoid pitfalls with automation? And lastly, how do you get started? So we will have some time at the end, about 5 minutes, to ask questions of the panelists, and there's networking after, so you can also just talk to people directly. So let's start with where are we now in automation? And let's start with life sciences, and I'll try to set the stage for this, and then we'll get into automation. So, my view of it is where we are today in life sciences is that product portfolios have exploded in size and diversity due to the convergence of new technologies. There's so much new technology, and there's so much diversity of innovation right now. At the same time, the pace of this technology is moving faster than ever, and the rate of that change is increasing as well. This has put enormous pressure on companies to innovate and improve their speed to market. So in that context, how do we codify and standardize and automate, right? That seems like the big challenge. So this question, let's just start off where we are in automation today, and we'll start with you, Frank. But I want to just ask you, what are the big trends that you're seeing in automation right now?
Okay, so the biggest trends that I see is much more capable robots and sensors and vision systems. The products we buy are more highly integrated today than they've been in the past, which means I get to do my job faster. Sensors are much more capable, so they can find things and defects that they weren't able to do before. And there's a tremendous interest since COVID in automating because we have a shortage of workers. So that's what I see as the big drivers for today.
Yeah, do you guys want to comment? Scott, you want to?
Yeah,
Add to
yeah. I guess I'll take a 10,000-foot view and come down. You know, we've all lived through this pandemic. We've seen, you know, I think the fragility of supply chains. You know, I live in Los Angeles. I would drive down into the valley and see 100 ships offshore trying to get into Long Beach Harbor, you know, and everyone's waiting for their part, their product, whatever it is. And so you're building something, you know, you're manufacturing a test kit for, you know, whatever it is, or some diagnostic work cell, or some medical device assembly line, and you can't get that part, you can't get that robot, you can't get that product. And so it's made companies think, maybe I need to look at my manufacturing a little bit different, you know, and not take onshoring as just, or offshoring rather, as just kind of, that's just how we're gonna manufacture, that's how we're gonna build. Companies began bringing things in, and they began looking anywhere they could. And so all of a sudden, manufacturers are taking a much different approach to what their product development looks like, and bringing things a bit closer to where they are. And as they do, companies began realizing, we haven't manufactured here before. We don't have the expertise. Where do we go? What do we do? I mean, I think we've all had so many conversations with people that, you know, they just don't know where to get started with manufacturing. And so what's really great about this industry is that it's not 20 years ago when we didn't have, say, the breadth of experience we have now. You know, you got guys with 40, 50 years experience in automation that you can rely on. You know, there's company system integrators like Frank that folks will go to, and you don't have to go it alone, and you can talk through this. And then, of course, you've got the labor issues, you know, that have really compounded all of this. As I bring manufacturing back, I just can't find the people to do it. And so it's really driven a higher level of adoption of automation than ever before. It's really, there's been prior trends, but the pandemic has certainly just accelerated all of this. And I think you've seen that even exacerbated further in life sciences because of the health nature of what we've gone through and the demand for life science products, diagnostics, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a great segue. Actually, I was going to see if you could chime in, Quentin, and talk a little bit just about how automation in life sciences is unique in and of itself.
Sure. So, not to be redundant with what these guys said, it's not as daunting as it used to be. The technology is much more approachable. If you find yourself in a situation where you have an opportunity, you want to find a good partner to make a start. I listen to people say, you know, we're bringing stuff back. The products that we've developed, we never left. We stayed here through all of this, and our goal was to be able to manufacture in the U.S. and be competitive. And the area that we're fortunate enough in life sciences to be involved in is a global, we're global leaders, and people look to us in America as, you know, the beacon, and we're often they attempt to knock us off. So we have an advantage. Massachusetts has a tremendous advantage with its capabilities and close proximity to great hospitals to develop innovative products and processes. So I think the question is you know, how do you make a start? And the first thing is you have to identify the problem, and then you have to look at how you go at solving it.
Scott, I think you sort of mentioned this, but is it all companies pursuing automation right now, or is it OEMs? I mean, I think Quentin's story is so unique because it's a startup that was acquired, right, or a company that was acquired, but who's pursuing automation right now?
Yeah, I think you're seeing it across industries. You're seeing it across applications. You're seeing it now. You know, you take a step back, and it's interesting to take a look at, say, a robot, right? You know, and a robot, you know, 20 years ago, I mean, could easily cost you $100,000, an industrial robot. The price has come down so significantly. And the technology, as Quentin mentioned, has improved, and the ease of use has improved, that it's opened up not just different industries, but it's opened up segments of industries. And so it's no longer just the large guys with all the capital that can do stuff, it's the small to medium-sized businesses that are getting into automation. You know, we're seeing small guys come, and by small, I mean, I'm not talking insignificant, but just small staffing-wise, come to us, others. I'm certainly, you know, frank integrators, and, you know, I've got a process. I've got a need, I've identified it. Or maybe I haven't, maybe I just have a problem and I don't know where to begin, and they're looking for a start. And so, you know, to answer your question, you're really seeing it everywhere. You know, all industries, all areas, and it's becoming more of a demand to do it, you know, for a whole variety of reasons that we'll talk about, but it's an important area for companies to at least take a look at and evaluate as part of their manufacturing process.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Quentin, I'd love to get your perspective on the OEM perspective on automation, but, I mean, was this a factor in the acquisition?
Sure. So, to kind of build on that, so when we started at Volano 6 years ago, there were 2 founders and myself and you know, a part-time consultant that we used, and we had a idea for a product, and we built it out, and then we designed that solution with the ultimate goal of being able to make a lot of them, right? That is ultimately the goal. It goes from a piece of paper to building something by hand, and then you have to have a view in how you can make many thousands and hopefully someday millions of them. So I'll tell you very quickly a brief story of this product. I had some samples here. So when you're admitted to a hospital, you get an IV catheter placed, and everybody gets one 100% of the time. And then every 4 or 5 hours, they come along with another needle and they stick you, and they do that so that they can draw blood, and that it's a primary aspect of doing diagnostics when you're in the hospital. So one of the founders had an idea that we could access these blood samples through the previously placed peripheral IV catheter, and that's where the idea of Pivo came, and that's how I met Frank and the guys from Epson, which is going to be the rest of the story, but I'll very quickly get to the point here. So the way Pivo works is it passes through, and maybe I get it open here. It passes through the IV catheter, it clips onto this, which is on your arm. It passes through the IV catheter like this, and then a piece of polyimide extends out into your bloodstream, and you sample the blood off the back here, then you pull it back, you withdraw it, and you never have to have a second needle or a third needle or a fourth needle or 100 needle sticks when you're in the hospital. So no one has ever done this before, and everybody told us it would never work. So we needed to, one, convince ourselves clinically that it would work, and then we needed to have an economic model that would work so that people would give us money so that we could build on this idea. And we started, and this is the case study part, we started this notion by designing a product that we thought we could automate, but we put it together by hand and we made a few thousand, and then we proved it worked, and then we started to get some excitement with our supporters. We didn't raise a tremendous amount of money, but we started making investments in putting it together because our goal was to continue to manufacture it here in the US, and in fact, here in Massachusetts, outside of Boston, is where this automation resides today. So during the course of that, we solved some problems, and we needed some help, and that's how I approached Epson and Frank, and they were great partners, and we collaborated to solve the problem. So we went from making a few thousand a week to hundreds of thousands a week, and when I say that, that eliminates millions of needle sticks a year. So we couldn't we couldn't make now millions of these without automation. We could make a few 100,000 a year, but we couldn't make tens of millions here. It wouldn't just not be feasible, and so that's the basis of the start of this relationship.
Yeah, that's great, and I want to ask you, Frank, to comment kind of on deployment in the industry right now. I thought it was really interesting in the first panel, talking about the need for productivity improvements for everything that we're talking about here, life sciences manufacturing, to meet the unmet medical needs that are coming. Automation and robotics is it, right? So where we are right now, what are the gaps when you're going in as an integrator? Is it we need more integrators, more service providers, more trained employees, more companies like Epson?
We start by, usually the customer has identified an issue. Occasionally, I've been doing this a really long time. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we would go and do a lot of plant surveys. Plant survey was we walk around saying, oh, we could possibly put a robot here, possibly put a robot there. That's not as prevalent today as it was then. Usually the customer has a pretty good idea of where their problems are, or where they are spending an inordinate amount of money, or failures, or scrap. And they ask us to come in and take a look at what possible solutions there are. For my experience in our company, possible solutions usually include a robot, but they don't always include a robot. So we'll meet with the client and go to their facility, visit it, learn as much as we can about the process, and go back with a suggested solution. Oftentimes, the company has 3 or 4 folks like me do it, so they get some competitive ideas, and the winner usually is the guy that comes up with the best solution, and not necessarily the guy who's the cheapest cost. So that's how we do 90% of our business. In preparation for today, I went on my computer yesterday to look for robotic systems integrators in Massachusetts. And it took me 3 pages to find a real robotic systems integrator, and 4th page, there was one who was in Massachusetts. So there's a lot of companies that do what I do. We're not very good at telling folks we're here. So it's a little hard to find. Our business usually comes in referrals. We get referrals from the robot companies that we represent, Epson, Kawasaki, and a few others. So they'll send us, they'll get a lead because they're spending money advertising and doing marketing, which we don't do very well. And we follow up those leads. A lot of systems integrators that are the size of my company usually wind up developing a couple of clients as their customers, and you just stay busy with 5 clients. You're always doing work for the same companies. And that works pretty well until you get bigger, and then you need to obviously have more clients. So that's how we work, and I think that's fairly typical of integrators up and down the spectrum.
Yeah, great. Okay, we're kind of running through our first section here pretty quickly. So I want to transition to this second question of how to identify opportunities for automation and avoiding pitfalls also. So let's start with the why, and I think it would be interesting for each of you to answer this. Maybe, Scott, we could start with you. But why automate? You know, this is, I'm sure there's an answer here, which is, well, that's completely dependent on who's automating, you know, and what the circumstances are. But in all of each of your experiences, you know, what do you settle in on in terms of what is the urgency now, and the benefit or the cost to not do it?
Yeah, no, it's a good topic, and it's one that, you know, everyone's wrestling with. You know, a better question maybe is why not automate, or at least look at it, you know, and the drivers have been multifaceted. You know, automation, if you go back, you know, not even that long ago, I mean, the drivers were cost reduction, they were throughput improvements, I need to have better quality checks, I need transparency into a process so that I can document when something was manufactured and if there was a bad lot, you know, and I could identify it, go back and fix something. You know, I mean, dependent on the company, dependent upon the application as to what you needed. Today, all those remain true. They haven't changed. But now you've got more things that have come into the fold that you need to think about, you know. There's intellectual property, you know. Do I want to keep things close to where I'm actually doing the manufacturing? Can I find people to do the work? You know, which is a topic we've been talking about, you know. It's very difficult to find employees, and, you know, we were talking a little bit before this, and every industry is having this problem, you know, trying to find laborers to do work. Life sciences really it compounds that because you're looking for specialized labor to do the work. You know, it's not just a body that packages something, you know, but usually you're doing something pretty focused, you know, and it takes a bit of training to do it, and if you can't find those people, that's a problem. Most companies also, you know, there's the 3Ds that, you know, usually historically, you know, automation folks will point you to, you know, the dull, dirty, dangerous. You know, if I've got a dull, dirty, or dangerous process, it's right for automation, you know. So those are the things that you look at. But really, it's where, you know, it's unique to you. Do I need speed? Do I need cost reduction? Do I need quality improvements? Can I find labor? I mean, if you've got problems with your manufacturing, somewhere in there, there's often an opportunity for automation. And it doesn't mean you have to automate everything, but usually you start with something very focused, you solve a specific problem, kind of see how it plays out, and you expand from there. And that can be different for every company. There's tons of opportunities out there.
Frank, you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just add that when we automate a process, we put checks in to ensure the quality. So when it's done automatically, every step in the process is precisely done at the right time interval. It can be logged, and you can go back and check that everything was properly done. And so you have that accountability that the system has done the process correctly. And I think that's a big thing. Obviously, you're saving labor, which is important, but the quality aspect is equally, I think, as important.
Yeah.
Especially in a life science setting. The PIVO, if the mold machine is not, you know, if it doesn't mold it at the right temperature and the right amount of time, you're going to have a failure, and they just can't have a failure. Because it's not good if one of those pieces break off in the bloodstream. So automation gives you that process control, and even if you're not using a robot, the automated controls will give you process control so you know that your product was manufactured correctly.
Sure.
Yeah, so to add what, Frank made me smile. So we've had 0 adverse events. We have had not a single product leak in the field since the product was introduced. And you really have to ask yourself, what I'm doing, is it a good use of a human being, right? And there's some things that humans are excellent at, but doing this over and over, if that's what you have, or this, and then this, and this, or that, and those are the things that are ripe. They're repetitive, and having to run manufacturing for a startup company where you don't have a lot of resources and somebody's gotta, you know, you got a task of, you have to make 500,000 of something the same way this week, and you need to have 70 people in your contract manufacturer show up on 3 shifts for, you know, 6 days of the week to get that done, and you can't have any failures. You know, so it wasn't really particularly dangerous work that we were doing, but it was highly critical. And in order to get to a quality level and a performance level, and when everybody was betting against us, and ultimately having Becton Dickinson appreciate the technology and then get a reward for our investors, we needed to do it in that way. And we studied the process, and we studied the part design, and we came to the conclusion that, you know, going to Asia was not the answer. Going and, you know, trying to muscle this through with a bunch of different people wasn't gonna be the answer. And that led us to the path of, you know, small chunks of automation, and then we brought it together with an integrator, and I have a happy outcome to share with you, so.
So if you're an existing manufacturer, in particular, I'm gonna just selfishly bring myself into this. So a small or mid-sized manufacturing company that has operations, many of the folks in this ecosystem, maybe not highly codified or highly standardized operations. How do you walk around your production floor and identify an opportunity for automation? And, you know, I'm interested in that small, mid-sized business perspective, but certainly speak to any of it. What's the first step to identifying opportunities? Is it call Frank and have him come in and he'll walk around? Or are there things that companies can do to prepare themselves before that?
I don't know if you want.
You start, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think it runs the gamut, you know. You know, as Quentin and Frank mentioned, sometimes there's a specific problem that needs to be addressed. A specific problem, you know, whether it's quality, or I can't, you know, find a guy to like do the end-of-line packaging, or, you know, the process is repetitive and it's got poor repeatability, and so therefore I don't have a consistent product that's manufactured, you know, so quality control's not checking out. You know, there's a whole variety of things that a customer might come to Epson, or they might go direct to an integrator if they're connected. You know, we'll see that happen a fair amount. We'll also see folks that are starting a brand new process, or they've got a new manufacturing line that's occurring inside their company, and they have never automated before, and they just don't know where to begin. And often starts, you know, again, I'll come back to it because it's really important. You know, what are you trying to solve? You know, what are you trying to solve? And is it speed? Is it quality? What is that problem? And be very, very focused on what that problem is. You know, one of the biggest issues that we'll see in companies that have either never automated before, or they've done it before, but they're starting a new process, is that there's mission creep, you know? So you've got that one thing, and then, oh, but we could add this to it. Oh, but we could do a little bit more. Oh, but there's that new vision system that's really cool. What if we added that in, you know? And all of a sudden, this simple project that you start with, this idea, this problem, begins to balloon up. And it makes proving success that much more challenging. And if you're trying to prove a concept inside your organization, you know, you're trying to give a proof of concept for doing automating or running a process and making sure that it works and scaling up, that much more difficult. And so, you know, we always encourage people, regardless of where they're at in their automation journey, you know, start simple, have a specific problem you're trying to address. You know, and then there's more things you can do after that. But once you get there, then the experts can jump in. And sometimes it's Epson that kind of, or a manufacturer will kind of point folks in the right direction. And often people don't have internal integrators. And so we work with the integrators. We work with the Franks, right? And so we're like, Frank, we got a guy for you, or gal, to, you know, here's an opportunity to work on solving the problem. And then the integrators come in. And, you know, integrators are amazing. We call them magicians, you know. It's like they'll take technology and art and solve these problems, you know? And one more thing with that is that integrators have often seen your problem before, you know? Not exactly, maybe, you know? We all want to think our problem's unique, but they've seen something like what you've faced before. And they can give you that expertise and help you to solve it effectively.
You guys want to add anything?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this quite a bit, and I think it starts with the problem statement and scoping that opportunity. I think you get your best return on that engagement, and it's really not that scary. It's not what it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago to get started. There's a good amount of expertise and support to help you be successful. So you don't have to go at it alone, and But I think it's incumbent upon. I was watching while Scott was talking, and there were a lot of people nodding about the problem statement. So we all know, as we walk around, man, if I could only, man, I'm putting that in that box every time that way, and that guy never comes, this is the 8th guy I've had to get to do that job. They just don't stay that long. I don't want to divert to another industry, but I work a little bit with a guy in food sciences, and if you think about McDonald's and filling cups, right? They have automated ice dispensing, integrated it when you order, so when there's nobody filling your cup anymore in the McDonald's, right? They push you order, they push a button, the ice is dispensed, the drink is dispensed, it rotates around, and somebody hands you the cup. Now, they're still frying burgers and other things, but they're working on that problem. So our stuff, it's not that hard. You got to pick the right problem to start with, and then you'll get better at it, and all of a sudden you'll be going down the road solving a lot more problems.
Yeah, that's exactly the way to start. And everybody has the issue with, we can't get it in the box right, or we've got 5 people standing around the same thing, So if you're in manufacturing, you've recognized some of the issues, and there's people out there like me that are willing to come in and help you through the first step.
All right, let's talk pitfalls. I want to have you share, if you're willing, the biggest mistake you've made or seen in this process. We're all friends. Nobody's going to know this other than this room and when they put the video out online, the world. But what are the pitfalls? What do you have to watch out for, and maybe some personal experience from you? Hot potato, anybody can start.
Yeah, we've had some pitfalls. Not asking enough of the right questions. This is not a life science story, but I have a customer that we've done investment casting projects with, and the guy I worked with retired and came back as a consultant. He was working with a plant in New Hampshire, and he said, "Oh, could you come up and look at a project?" It wasn't a robot project. We were going to build he needed to take the mold from the investment casting cell out safely where they break it apart and melt the wax out, whatever. So we went up and we designed a device to do that. And we sent drawings and all kinds of things, and everybody shook their head. Okay, great, we got an order, we built the thing. They come and test it, and it takes the 1,200-pound mold, and it spins it upside down and does everything it's supposed to do. So we ship it, and they get their maintenance department involved now to move the fence around and bolt this thing to the ground so we can come up and make it work. And the guy in the maintenance department said, "Well, if you put that here, how do we get inside there and service our rainfall sander? Because we have to drive the fork truck through the gate that we had taken out and put this big machine in front of." And you know what? It never got installed. It's still sitting in their warehouse getting all rusty. because they haven't found a solution to service the sander. So the engineers did their part and I did my part, but we didn't get enough information. So I'm a big advocate of meeting when get to a proposal and the customer's thinking he's going to go forward with it. I like to talk to some of the operators and the maintenance people and get a varied view of it, because I don't want to make that mistake again. That was a lot of hard work to see just not go anywhere.
It was an expensive learning, right? I mean,
It was very expensive learning, yes.
So I think for me, and I've been doing it a long time, the sort of, when I think about these big misses, it have to do mostly with things that were way more complex than they needed to be. So I have a host of examples, and I guess as I've matured, I've grown to love simplicity and the least amount of complexity that you can possibly have in a process or a product design. I mean, I hate gluing things together. I don't like welding things together. I try to snap them together where I can. I try to overmold and eliminate glue. I'm gonna not get too technical here, but early on in my career, I won't mention the company that I work for. This is a transformational moment for me. I was hired, and I was on a project to design a contingency for another piece of kit that they had put in there, and they had spent, I think, almost $50 million on this massive undertaking that involves spin welding some parts together, and they had to get a hermetic seal, and it had to be high precision. They meant to make a lot of them a minute, hundreds, 500, I think, a minute was the starting speed. So I won't go too long on this. But ultimately, it worked really well on the bench, but when you looked at it, the thing was massive. There was so much to control, and when they tried to scale it, it just wasn't able to be scaled. So I designed a product that snapped together, replaced all of that stuff, and they're still making that, I don't know, hundreds of millions of them that way. But you can walk around the process and you can see a lot of complexity in things that are, you know, sort of forced together. You want to try to avoid as much as you can that over complexity. Start simple and build on success. You know, that's my advice, and you won't go wrong doing that.
Yeah, that's great. You want to contribute,
You
Scott, or we
wanna
can
add
move
to the
on?
complexity?
Any horror stories?
I won't name any names, so it's-
Yeah, he's got some examples.
so, yeah, we won't protect the innocent, right? But, you know, we've talked about simplicity, we've talked about making sure you know what you're trying to solve. Another big one is making sure that you do it right. And what's right? There is no right, but don't skimp corners. You know, I'll talk to my engineering team about this a fair amount, and they'll see customers come in with a problem, and they're like, I can get that robot for this much, I know what it needs to do, whatever, and they go it alone, they go do it, you know. Maybe they have some experience, maybe they got a guy, you know, whatever it is, but they've never really done it. It's their first automation endeavor, and they go it alone, and the thing just falls apart, it fails, it doesn't meet specs, cycle time, whatever they're looking for, whatever their goal was. Maybe they didn't even define a goal, who knows, but they went it alone, and they tried to get it done. The big advice, especially from, and I'm kind of channeling our application engineering team, is make sure that you, especially when you're starting out, you reach out to those that have done it before. It can be us. We've got a team that does feasibility and validation studies, and they can walk you through certain things. We're not an integrator. It's not our area of expertise, but we do work with integrators. We can point you in the right direction. And if you do that, if you do it right, if you get help up front, and you get help with the design, make sure you track to spec, you know, and you have to do all that hard work. You need to document your process, you know, you need to make sure you identify what that goal is, but if you do that, you're gonna pay a bit more. You're gonna pay more for it, but it's gonna pay for itself in dividends. Because your ROI is gonna be way quicker, you're gonna have performance, you're gonna have success, and you're gonna be able to show a proof point to those that are making the decisions or maybe paying the bills, right? And so that's probably kind of my vague advice to that naming a customer, is don't go it alone and do it
They
right.
appreciate it. Yeah, Quentin appreciate it, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
All right, so maybe a little transition into our next section, but there seems, from our discussions, there's a lot of misconceptions around capital investment, risk, even internal talent to be able to pursue automation. For somebody who's not the CEO, do you have any tips for kind of, how do you package this and sell it to a manager or a management team? What's the best approach, or are there, some that you've seen work?
I'm happy.
Go ahead.
Yeah, let's tell a little Volano story. So I'm out in San Francisco, the founders are there, and we have venture capital involved. See, most of the venture capital guys that were in San Francisco that were investors in our business were used to software companies where, there are no capital investments, right? You got some guys in a room with, they're drinking Red Bull and they're coding all night, and then you paying them, and, they're not, they never sleep, and you get some code and you sell an app, and you get a return, like 1/1,000,000th of those work out, and there's a big story, Facebook or whatever. Here, this is, in medical device, the medical device and life science business is a capital intensive business. It's R&D intensive, and you have to make stuff, right? There's actually a product that comes out at the end, which requires physical, manifestations of the intellectual property. Said not so simply, but which requires investment. So that investment, though, when you look at the cost of today of an assembler in Massachusetts of what you're going to think with benefits, you're probably talking about $80,000 cost with benefits and everything else if you want that person to stay around. And if you have to have him working, 3 of them working to put this in a box, all of a sudden you're at $240 a year, and I think you can get a quote on these guys on what a Scara or a 6-axis robot is going to cost you in some programming. I can do the math real quick. It'll probably pay for itself in less than a year, and then you can find something better to do with those folks. Train them for a higher end job, teach them how to program, make them controls engineers that they're in short supply. So in what we do in life science, as long as you have the multiplier, in other words, you're going to get the volume there. The justification in these kinds of investments is almost always there. I rarely see a case where you can't get a reasonable cash flow payback in inside of a year or a year and a half in terms of outflow. And I think for these kinds of investments, those are really good returns.
Yeah, I mean, the ROI analysis is critical. It's critical for justifying a project internally, to yourself, to your team. And you'll start with that problem statement, which we've mentioned many times, but also documenting your process. And that's going to really help you extract, okay, how long does it take Bob to put that package in the box, or Jane to assemble that part? And you can begin to build out, if I don't have automation, what does this cost? What am I spending? And then what's that risk?
That's it.
Right now, that risk of having, I'll pick on Bob, I don't know who Bob is, but Bob putting that, assembling that component together with poor repeatability means I'm going to have waste, failure, overage, all these added cost components, which reduce your bottom line. And if I can mitigate that with, I don't know, $150,000, $200,000, $500,000 automation system, right? however that looks, you know, and again, start simple. You can show, as Quentin mentioned, you can prove ROI pretty quickly. But it's making sure you do all your due diligence. And you know what you're doing today, where you want to be, and then proving what you can save on, or where you can optimize, rather. And that can be cost savings, quality, whatever it is, but it often comes to a dollar and a payback. And that is critical for just proving it out, you know? I mean, people often don't say, yep, go automate just because. You need to do that due diligence up front.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk getting started. I think we have a couple more minutes of my questions, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. If you don't have any, I'm gonna cold call on you, so get ready. Can you guys share some experience, just what's the best way to get started? What's the low-hanging fruit? I mean, I think we've talked in pieces about this throughout, but for people who are interested, how do you start?
I'll do a selfless plug for Epson.
That was the meatball, Scott.
You hit it now. Go, hurry up now, do your plug and get on it.
So we've been addressing how to get started for quite some time. We actually began before COVID began, because we were seeing an increased number of new folks come to automation and not knowing exactly, as you asked, where to get started. And it was coming up so often that we built a webinar around it. We called it Automation 101. So it's, you know, aptly named, where to get started. And that turned into a white paper, which you can download on epson.com/automation101. Go download it, take a look. Whether you've done automation for some time or you're new to it, it's a really great document. We still use it. We still run webinars, and we still get great attendance 5-6 years after we built this, because it's truly evergreen. You know, it's document your process. Well, have a goal, document your process, define your requirements, you know, speed, precision, payload, you know, identify peripheral equipment, and who's going to do the work. 5 steps. You know, and automation's much more complicated than that, of course, but it gives you a framework for things to think about, how to apply it inside your organization with your own issue. And once you've done at least the first 2 steps, problem, document your process, you can go to a Frank, hey, here's my process, here's my problem, and then he can dive in and he can start diagnosing and designing something for you. And so it's, I think Quentin mentioned it earlier, it's not as complicated as a lot of people make it out to be. It doesn't mean it's like simple, like you don't have to do any work, but there is a process for this, and people are getting started, and they're getting started with no background or experience in this, and they're seeing success. And we've seen it time and time and time again.
What about you, Frank? I mean, do people have to come to you with like a program for integration, or do you have people that come to you and just say, I'm not sure, I think there's opportunity, but can you help
Yeah,
us?
All of the above.
Yeah.
Yeah, both. I'd like to add a couple of things, I think, or this is a good place to do it. Today, every customer that we visit is looking to make their current employees more productive. It's not, there's never, we haven't, in the past 3 years, been in a customer who wants to put automation in to eliminate employees. So what I've been telling customers is, if you automate, you can get 2 or 3 more of your best employees, because that's what people are doing now. The good employees that come to work every day and do a great job, we can relieve some of the things that they have to do so they can do more. So that's a slight shift in the way you might look at it, but that's what a lot of our potential customers have been telling us.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, so for me, where I start, so these guys are part of the relationship that made this all happen. This is a real life story, and these were real partners, still are. So for me, where it starts is whatever the particular problem is that that I have to solve. A lot of times it's around a product or a product configuration or a process that I'm trying to optimize or develop or, or scale, right? And then what the right tool is, and I don't mean to call Frank and Scott tools, but they are valuable.
Thank you, thank you.
Actually, I read recently that's a compliment to be called, a useful thing.
Apparently.
Yeah, apparently so.
What's a panel without a little name calling, right?
A useful,
Well, I could start. So starting with the problem statement, documenting that, and then calling Epson or if you have a, and a integrator, come and take a look at this problem, and then I keep coming back to it. I've done this a long time. It's not what it used to be to get a start here. The technology has really, really evolved. The capabilities that we have now to apply to solve these problems, where we used to have to get all these different pieces, and, it was a pretty big undertaking. It's still not a small undertaking, but, your chances of success are pretty high if you pick the right thing and get the right partners. And these two guys are good people, and I drove 300 miles here to tell this story. I'm gonna drive back 300 miles. I don't do a lot of these appearances. We have a lot of things going on. We're really proud of the work, and I have a vested interest in the state of Massachusetts. I've raised a family here, and we do a lot of manufacturing here, and we think we have products that kick ass around the world, and we're going to continue to keep it going, and we got some good partners that can help you all do it. So don't be afraid, and define your product problem carefully, and then go find the right people to go to work with.
That's great, thank you. I think that's a good kind of closing statement. We'll open it up to some questions. I just want to go back to something Frank said and share a story from, actually, Steve and I hosted a politician who I will not name to view a new piece of equipment that we had in our facility in the last couple of years. And the question that came from the politician was, how many people will that replace? We were so excited about this piece of equipment, and it was all sort of this negative connotation about jobs. And there's real data. I'm sure most people in this room are aware of it, but there's very real data when you improve productivity and automation and robotics, that growth goes up and so does employment, right? And just like the narrative that Ben and Ken, and they were talking about on the last panel about manufacturing being dark, dirty, and dangerous, we have to get rid of that narrative. We also have to get rid of the narrative that the future of manufacturing is the matrix, and there's no people involved, and we're all just, sitting in we're blobs doing nothing. That's not the future, and I think that you guys have really, laid that out well, so thank you. And I know this type of topic is, everyone just wants to get up and go talk to these guys directly, right? Because it's all about the specifics of what everybody's got going on in their day. So let's open it up for some questions. Hopefully we have a couple. If not, then we can break. And please, thank you all. Let's just give these guys a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you.
I always have questions. So, Quentin, can you talk a little bit about how you shore up your regulatory process, right? Because when I talk to small companies, that's kind of the biggest thing they're concerned is if they do their manufacturing one way to get product on the market and prove viability, how can they really be sure that they can transfer that to automated processes afterwards?
Yeah, sure. So there is a step, right, from a manual assembly. You have to prove, and you get clearance on a product, you may get early feasibility on that product made in that way, and then you have to prove that it's equivalent. And you can do that, and the FDA will work with you. There's a process called the Special 510K. It's a 30-day review. If you have good regulatory people, you can lay out how you prove this here, and then how you validated your process, and it's not a full approval, and it's pretty straightforward. We've done it.
And when you talk to investors about that, did you notice any kind of hesitation? I would assume if you're working with BD, they understand that process, right? They know what that is, but early stage investors may look at that and think it's a big risk.
Yeah, so everything's a big risk when it's their money, right? And but they're also in the business of getting people who can help them manage through those those risks and building that confidence, having done it a long time, having a regulatory person on your staff that, you know, has plenty of experience in these kinds of things, can, you know, talk them off the edge, and then you can go ahead. But that's part of this case study too. We needed to get product approved, made it by hand, got it cleared with the full traditional, and then went back to the FDA with a special and had it cleared in 30 days with validation here.
Can I ask one more if nobody else has one? When talking about, because I nerd out on design and automation, so when
Sure.
you're designing your products, when you're thinking about designing the manufacturing process at the same time, how do those two things overlay? Is it designing the product, then when are you thinking about automation? You talked about it from the beginning, but how soon are you actually really thinking about that?
Yeah, so this is a lesson I've been teaching a long time. That's a great question. Thanks for asking. I don't ever separate, right? And I think that, and I try to the folks who have worked with us in the various organizations, I think the most successful products that we've ever developed, we've integrated how we're going to manufacture them with the product configuration. It's just one and the same. If you don't know how you're going to do that, and that just doesn't go for mechanical devices. It has to go, I mean, I ran technology development for Genzyme for 6 years, and that was a lot of Genzyme biomaterials, not the therapeutics part of it, although I did help them with some process development there. But you have to understand how that's going to work, right? If you get something in, you know, my bad story, how something works on the bench, you need to be able to have a vision on how that's going to be, you know, if you really aspire to, you know, have global dominance, you better know how you're going to get there, at least some steps along the way to be able to scale it.
I'll add one thing to that as well. Epson's a vertically integrated company, and, you know, we got started in automation because we needed it, you know? I mean, we needed it to make our wristwatches, our printers, our scanners, et cetera, and so we make everything that we sell, you know? And we, you know, a lot of our opportunities, a lot of customers we work with, it's more, I've got a problem, I need to solve it, you know, and they've already developed their, you know, design for manufacturing, or maybe they haven't. But we like to talk to customers about that up front as much as we can. You know, we work with key accounts, long-term customers, et cetera, and try to get insight into, okay, so what's coming in the future? And so to get them thinking about, how does manufacturing fit into that pipeline you have, or that product that you're going to develop? Because you can really save yourself a lot of pain down the road if, as Quentin said, if you couple the two together, you know? I mean, they really shouldn't be separate processes. If they do, I mean, you know, you've designed something, you've done your R&D, whatever, and then it's like, okay, punt it over the fence to the manufacturing guys, and they're like scratching their heads, trying to figure out how to do it, and they need to be synced, you know? And you have such a more effective outcome if you do it. And we talk about that because we do it at Epson. That's part of our lifeblood and what we make.
Do you have a question, Sean? Go ahead.
More of a statement. Sean Keeney, Berkshire Sterile Manufacturing in Lee, Massachusetts. We just completed the installation of a $9 million sterile filling line, which has 4 stopping robots that interact with a bunch of other very complicated equipment to fill drugs into vials and syringes. And yes, we have the advantage of the robots replace operators. We can be operators there. And they also do things reproducibly. But the biggest advantage by far is that they don't contribute any contamination at all into the environment, which in a traditional manned clean room, operators bring in contamination, can lead to drug contamination. It's estimated that 70% of the contamination in clean rooms comes in with the people that come in there. So the biggest advantage by far in this particular application was not the savings in labor or not getting things done consistently, but reducing the contamination that gets brought into the clean rooms.
Yeah, I think if you think about that in, you know, just take that forward in cell and gene therapy, right? How important is not having cross-contamination and messing up, you know, when you're taking somebody's own cells and bringing them into your manufacturing process and producing a product on the other side of that. And there's just a limit of that material too, so it's really interesting. Any other questions?
So, I guess mostly for you, Frank, because your firm does this, but I guess anybody can answer. Sean brought up a great point about contamination, something I didn't even think about, not an expert in robotics. What are some of the other intangibles that play play a part in your bottom line, in your savings, your financial analysis, you report to folks who you're convincing to use your systems?
Well, I mentioned some of them, the quality, any process that's done with automated system, be it a robot or servos and controls are done repeatably, precisely, same way every time. So there's a huge quality thing, the predictability, obviously the productivity. Those are the main things. Reduction of scrap is another thing that we look at for justification purposes. There's some management, there's less problems and less people, so there's some benefits from a management standpoint. So those are the things I think that mostly give you an ROI. And several of the robotics companies have documents on their webpage that talk about all these things. I think you guys do.
Yeah, we actually have we got a brochure outside on life sciences, worth taking a look at. But yeah, I mean, there's the usual suspects on an ROI analysis, but, then there's things, and I think it's a really important comment, about just, the offset of labor, it's not trying to take away jobs, and rarely do you see that. You're trying to optimize your workforce. Your workforce is invaluable. More so now than ever. I mean, it's hard to find people, and so you want to retain them, and you want to maximize what they do, and so that can be part of your ROI analysis. If I've got a guy, making, X, or gal making X per hour with some level of productivity, if I migrate them to something else with a higher level of productivity at a similar cost point, it's like, that's benefit, And so sometimes it's things directly related to the actual process, and sometimes it's the tangential benefits that you have.
So I'll just wrap that all up. So there's really objective things you can measure. They've just talked about them. I'll give you the final one for me, which is quality of life, which is my ability to sleep at night, which is all of those things that they were talking about. If you lay awake, and there's only really there's a couple of critical defects. One of them is sealing these packages, right? So we start off, we have people putting them in, pushing this down. If you have a control system on that, it never misses, right? You challenge it, it can never, ever miss. As long as you're smart enough to think of all the ways that it can go wrong with the machine, you can challenge it and make sure it never happens. Not that someone purposely would make a mistake, but they lay it on a bar, they talk to the person next to them, the light comes on, they think they've done it, they put it there, you have a checker on there, it misses it, and you have a non-sterile one. So that and the operators, we took a young lady who was on a packaging line. She was interested in automation. We sent her to community college. She's now automation tech for us. So believe me, we're not looking at a limit of that politician. You got to get out more. That's all I can come out here in the real world and try to really run this stuff here in this country. It's a wonderful place to live, and we have real competitive advantages. So there's great tools available, and it's not that hard to start. So.
Okay, I think we're going to leave it there. Thank you, everyone. I just want to thank Epson again. Thanks for sponsoring this. Follow up with Scott. Joe's in the back of the room also. Get some of their pamphlets. These guys have really interesting technology. And I just want to thank Ben and Steve. I think this is pretty incredible for me to be sitting here. I was born and raised in Stockbridge, and we run a business here, but we're sitting on this soil talking about life sciences, manufacturing, and automation. And that doesn't happen if all the people in this room don't keep coming back to these events and force incredible people
Our pleasure.
Entice incredible people like this to come here and to talk about this technology and to serve this ecosystem. So we got to keep doing it. I'm looking forward to it. So thanks, everybody, and thanks to the panelists.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll take a couple minutes and then have our third group come on up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.